It's often remarked and bemoaned that we live in an era of political incivility. So nasty is the tone these days, we're seeing it already in Campaign 2000, that we fully expect political rivals of the moment to be personal enemies for the rest of their lives. But it needn't be that way. For our Sunday morning profile on this eve of President's Day, our colleague Lesley Stahl of 60 Minutes has paid a visit to former Presidents Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, who waged a pretty tough battle for the presidency in 1976.
The typical Carter meanness, the typical Carter vindictiveness.
In their first debate, the sound system failed.
On the technical side as to what the problem is there.
And they stood frozen at their lecterns for 27 minutes, never saying a single word to each other.
Very possibly this first meeting is over.
Gerald Ford wanted to stay in the White House he had inherited when Richard Nixon resigned. In 1976, Jimmy Carter was a former peanut farmer and virtually unknown former governor of Georgia.
Mr. Ford, so far as I know, except for avoiding another Watergate, has not accomplished one single major program for this country.
So in other words, you'd had the normal kind of brutal campaign that Americans, even back then, came to expect.
Yeah, but even during the campaign, I never referred to Jerry except anything except my distinguished opponent.
Yeah, but then you zinged him.
Well, on occasion, we were partisan. We still have a partisan difference, but it wasn't much of a zinging compared to nowadays.
You said he was weak, and you said he didn't have any programs, and you said that Henry Kissinger was the real president. So you didn't like that.
As far as foreign policy goes, Mr. Kissinger has been the president of his country. Mr. Ford has shown an absence of leadership and an absence of a grasp of what this country is and what it ought to be.
The atmosphere was totally different then than it is or has been in recent years. I never thought that the comments that Jimmy made during the campaign were a personal attack. Sure, that was legitimate political language that the politicians understood. I did. I had a few quips to pass along.
I remember those too. You said he waffled, he wiggled, and that he would say whatever he wanted to say to suit the audience. That's what you said about him.
Oh, did he say? I don't even remember those things.
Yeah, you waffled, you wiggled, you said.
The governor has also played a little fast and loose with the facts about vetoes.
The Ford campaign, I think their lowest moment was Carter made his famous "lust in my heart" comment to Playboy. And
historian and Carter biographer Douglas Brinkley.
They ran a campaign ad, the Ford people, which had a divided ad, and it showed one half Jimmy Carter, "lust in my heart," read Playboy if you want to know about Jimmy Carter, and then it had a Newsweek story which said Gerald Ford was really doing a good job as president, and read Newsweek if you want to know about Gerald Ford. But as
things go today, that's nothing.
Nothing. It was,
and that was sort of that was the worst of it.
That was the worst of it. They took the high road, I think, that year.
None of it was personal. You know, it was just a heat of a campaign. But that was before the terrible era of just incisive, negative campaigning.
I would add one feature. Today, one-liners are so critical, apparently, in the political arena. I thought our debates, the one in Philadelphia, San Francisco, and in Virginia, were very, very thoughtful.
His insensitivity in providing those people a chance to work has made this a welfare administration and not a work administration. He hasn't saved $9 billion with his vetoes. There's only been a net saving of $4 billion.
We didn't aim at one-liners. We probably criticized each other very strongly.
Governor Carter apparently doesn't know the facts.
But under no circumstances did I ever think badly of Jimmy Carter as a person.
Now, Newsweek wrote that you despised him.
Oh, well, can't believe the press.
The election was eyelash close.
Now he's holding up the paper saying, Carter wins.
But immediately after, Gerald Ford invited Carter to the White House.
The day after the election, when we lost, I told my staff, this will have to be the smoothest, most cooperative transition from one administration to another.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully
I was
execute.
honored hear Jimmy at his inauguration. I've forgotten the precise words, but you were very, very complimentary that I'd healed the wounds of Watergate, etc.
For myself and for our nation, I want to thank my predecessor for all he has done to heal our land.
He brought to the White House in the post-Watergate period the essence of honesty and integrity and openness. And I recognized that, as did all the other people. I hope who heard my voice on that day.
That started their own healing.
I think that kicked it off, Lesley.
Thank you, Mr. President.
But it wasn't until their mutual friend, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, was assassinated in 1981 that their real bonds began to form. President Reagan asked the exclusive club of ex-presidents, Ford, Carter, and Richard Nixon, to represent the United States at the funeral.
They flew over together, and Nixon had to break the ice. There was frostiness between Ford and Carter, and it was Richard Nixon who was the jovial one trying to take these two men who had campaigned hard against each other in '76 and bring them together.
It's almost as if someone locked you on the plane and said, you'll come out friends.
But it was a good experience.
Did the fact that this circle of ex-presidents is so small, they call it the smallest trade union ever in the world, and the fact that who else would understand what you've been through? Who could you talk about the past with? Is that a part of the reason why you've become such good friends?
I think it's fair to say that some of the others aren't as warm and as close as Jimmy and I are.
Why?
Personality.
That's true.
There you go again.
Nothing cements a friendship like a mutual enemy.
I understand that Mr. Ford is arriving here in the state. I guess he's arrived already.
For Ford, it started during the '76 election when Reagan challenged him from within the Republican Party.
Must not have known whether to play Hail to the Chief or Santa Claus is coming to town.
What Ronald Reagan did to Gerald Ford in '76, he questioned whether this man was capable of being president, whether he had what it took. So Jimmy Carter had a very wounded Gerald Ford in some ways to run against.
4 years later, Reagan ran another brutal campaign against Jimmy Carter.
You know what to do come next Tuesday.
And crushed him.
Ladies and gentlemen, President-elect Ronald Reagan.
When the Reagans came, it wasn't all that pleasant.
Boy, the story was that they wanted you and Rosalind Carter to move out of the White House early so that Nancy Reagan could redecorate the White House.
That's what I heard.
You were actually asked, would you consider it?
I didn't consider it.
Well.
No, I didn't consider it. But it wasn't a pleasant transition.
I think if Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter had not been presidents and lived in the same community, they would be friends. They have the same kind of values in some ways. I think there's a general decency to both men. They never are classic wheeler-dealer types of politicians. They're not comfortable with a Bill Clinton who's a different generation and a product, I think, of a more highly media age.
I'm always interested at who disdain television, and it's always those who aren't good on it.
Yeah, that's right.
And neither of them were very good on television.
Neither of them were very good on television. Neither of them are particularly what you'd call glib characters. There's a down-homeness to both of them. I think most Americans would feel comfortable having the Fords or the Carters visit them in their home.
As ex-presidents and friends, Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford have monitored foreign elections together and promoted human rights and international health causes. Gerald Ford became an integral part of the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter's home base for solving the world's problems.
Carter and Ford remind us of, in this time of, sex scandals and everyday scandals in the White House, that decent people enter politics. They might make wrong policies, they might be failed, but you'd have to be hard-pressed to say that Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford don't have integrity and aren't honest and basically do what they think is right for the country.
The surveys are looking better and better. I guess the older and the longer you're out of office, the nicer people think you were.